everybody, welcome back to Checkerboard Chat, the official sports podcast of the Daily Beacon. As always, I'm Tyler Wombles, and that's DeMichael Cole. We're back here bringing you more Tennessee athletics news, updates, discussions, whatever we feel like talking about. This is a special episode of Checkerboard Chat today because we have two special guests here with us. We've got Blake Von Hagen and Will Backus. These two guys are going to be the sports editors next year. We're going to introduce them to you in this episode. So first of all, just Blake, tell us what role you're going to have next year, and then talk a little bit about what you've done at the Beacon so far, and just give us an overview of who you are.
Right, so I'm Blake Von Hagen, like you said. I'll be the sports editor next year. I started out last fall I covered swimming and diving all semester last fall, and then this semester I've covered baseball. So I'm looking forward to getting started next year.
For sure, and Blake has actually been a pretty renowned swimming and diving beat writer. There's actually been some discussions in the journalism department about his reach and his knowledge of the swimming and diving beat. But no, seriously, Blake has done a great job with us on that beat. He's doing a great job with us on baseball. And so we're actually going to later on in the episode talk more to him about Tennessee baseball. We're going to discuss a little bit of some Tennessee football. But just Blake, what are you looking forward to about next year? What are you excited about in taking over as sports editor?
I'm just excited about the whole thing, really. But I'm looking forward to Tennessee basketball. I think that the team's going to be really good next year, so that'll be a fun sport to cover. And then football, obviously, that's a big spectacle around here. So I'm looking forward to going to Neyland, going to some road games with Will, and we're looking forward to that a lot. And then just running the whole section. Trying to be as good as you guys are, but we'll see.
Well, it's very flattering. I would say that he's wrong, but he's not. So just, Blake, it's pretty interesting here, because you're almost like Jeremy Pruitt. You're, taking over as a head coach, sports editor, however, what have you. And so that's sort of interesting. You'll be covering a coach in his first year with the team, and you'll be your first year on the beat. So
if I'm Jeremy Pruitt, are you Nick Saban?
Or Butch Jones?
Ooh.
I'm Jimbo Fisher. I'll be Jimbo.
Okay, so
Fisher.
we've established that DeMichael's Jimbo Fisher. I'm not going to answer that personally. I'm just going to let everyone make their own decisions.
I just cashed a big paycheck around here, so.
Exactly. But no, if you guys want to vote on whether, if you want to put in the comments whether I'm Nick Saban or, Butch Jones, you can. That's up to you. But, as you mentioned, we also have Will Backus here. He's going to be the assistant sports editor next year. So, Will, just, talk a little bit about yourself. What beats have you covered, and what are you excited about doing for the Daily Beacon next year?
Yeah, I'm Will Backus. I'm a journalism major. I've covered pretty much everything. I don't think there's really any sport I haven't covered yet, maybe besides track and field, and I'll be doing that this week. So, I've got a lot of experience covering pretty much every sport at least once, and I'm super excited to work with Blake. I think we'll do a great job, and I'm really looking forward to it.
For sure, and so since we're sort of aligning you guys with people on the Tennessee football staff, I don't know how we got in this wormhole, but we're here now, so we got to keep going with it. I guess would that make you? Did they have an assistant head coach or associate head coach? Have they announced who that is?
I have no idea.
Well, would you want to be Tyson Helton?
I was thinking
Sure,
Tyson
I'll be
Helton.
Tyson Helton.
Yeah,
okay.
Dynamic.
That's awesome.
You can bring a potential.
Now you have a lot on your shoulders this
Some
year.
West Coast
You
swag.
you have to choose the future for Tennessee at quarterback, and everyone's dependent on you.
I think we're going a little too deep here.
I'm just the assistant sports editor. I didn't sign up.
That's too much responsibility. I didn't sign up for this.
You're gonna wake up tomorrow and you're literally Tyson Helton, like a
Freaky
Freaky Friday type
yeah,
thing.
Tyson
Yeah,
Helton's
exactly. But no, Will. So yeah, Will. He actually covered Lady Vols with me a lot last year. We had a good time doing that. So Will, just talking a little bit about that more. Having covered, that big beat and moving into this assistant sports editor role, how do you think that will help you, and what are you most excited about to cover for next year?
I mean, I think it'll help me covering football because football's, like Blake said, a spectacle. It's the biggest sport here. But getting my feet wet with something like Lady Vols basketball, it's arguably one of the 3 biggest sports here. That's really going to help cover football. And I think it'll also kind of help me deal with the pressures of being an editor because I had to do quite a bit covering the Lady Vols, and I'll have a lot of responsibilities as assistant sports editor. And in terms of things I'm looking forward to, I'm just looking forward to running a section and, dealing with the staff. I think that'll be fun. It'll be stressful at times, but it'll be cool. We've got a lot of good guys coming back so far. And I really look forward to covering the Lady Vols again and covering football. That'll be nice.
For sure. And guys, before we move on here in this section, is there anything that you else would like to add? Maybe would like to say to all the viewers out there as they prepare for you to take the reins over from us as sports editors?
I'm no Donald Trump, so I'm not going to trash talk you guys. I'm just looking forward to getting started and carrying where you guys left off.
We'll be better.
Ooh.
See, obviously,
that's a
Will's,
hot take.
Yes,
that's a
Will's
hot take.
He's the offensive coordinator. He's
Yeah.
dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
I'll be
you guys
better
can
than
put in
Larry
the
Scott.
comments whether you think that they will be. No, don't do that. It'll hurt my feelings. But yeah, so that's once again that's Blake Von Hagen. He is going to be the sports editor next year. That's Will Baggis. He will be the assistant sports editor. And in all seriousness, I really am excited about these guys. I think they're going to do a really great job. They both have done great jobs as beat writers this year. They've covered their sports very well, and we are appreciative of all the work they've done. And I think that they will take the reins over well. And I think that we will have possibly an even better sports section next year. I don't, if that's possible, we'll see. But
And man, we live for high standard here, so.
yeah, y'all did. To be fair, DeMichael and I have been a little bit worn down this semester because we had to cover that coaching surge. So you'll be a little bit
that's
more
a good
fresh.
point.
I mean, yeah. Hopefully you won't have to go through that.
yeah, exactly.
I can't
Chances
see.
are very slim.
We can't
but-
promise. We
Can't-
can't
But-
promise
can't see
anything.
anything after that would
I mean, I
happen.
didn't think we would go through it.
We can't put in your contract that you won't have to go through that because we can't,
It
or
is
an athletic
Tennessee.
director search or anything of that nature.
Right.
But we'll be hoping for you. All right, so now guys, we're going to switch gears a little bit here. We're going to talk about some Tennessee baseball. Obviously, the Vols have finished up their series with Florida. Florida took 2 games. Tennessee took 1 game. Obviously, Florida is ranked number 1 in the nation. Blake, since you're our baseball beat writer, we'll let you kick this off here. Just what have you seen out of the Vols recently? What did you see with them in that series? And just what are some main takeaways that you have?
Well, it's been a pretty interesting season, I think, so far for the Tennessee baseball team. I think you can kind of sum it up with you look at the James Madison midweek games about a month ago. The first game, Tennessee goes out and wins 10-1, and you're thinking, well, tomorrow's going to be the same thing. Wednesday, Tennessee loses one of the worst games in Tennessee baseball history, 21-2, and you're wondering, what's going on here. But I think the main thing is head coach Tony Vitello. He's kind of remained. He's even keel. He tries to stay positive the whole time, and I think his players are kind of taking that on, and you can see it. They're picking up a win against number 8 Ole Miss on the road, number 1 Florida at home. Those are 2 pretty impressive wins. When you're a first-year head coach with you're kind of using leftover pieces. He's known as a recruiter, so we'll really see what he can do next year moving forward. But right now, 5-7 in SEC play. You've got 3 other schools that are also 5-7, 2 that are 4-8. So they're all battling. 2 teams don't make the SEC tournament. The rest of them do. So I think that's kind of the goal so far for this team is to make the SEC tournament, and they've got themselves in a position, about the midpoint here of the SEC season where they can make that happen.
For sure, and you did mention Vitello, in that role as his first-year head coach. I think, heading into that Florida series, obviously they did drop 2 of those games, but, one of those games went pretty deep into extra innings. I think a lot of people maybe would not have expected a young Tennessee team with a new head coach to compete in that type of game. It's the number 1 team in the nation. So, and just, y'all can chime into it if you want, but what, how much do you think that goes for their confidence moving forward? Just having competed with that number 1 team, you just won one of those games, but you were close to winning that other one. So what does that do for their confidence moving forward?
I mean, I think it has to help. Vitello said, after losing that first game of the doubleheader, coming into the second game, he said Florida jumps out to a 1-0 lead in the top of the first inning on a solo home run. He said that the mood was kind of flat in the dugout. But then after that, the third inning, they get the offense going, and we're able to get a 6-4 victory in that game. And I think that has to help a team moving forward to be able to bounce back, especially after on Saturday they lost a pretty bad score line in the first game of the series, and then losing the heartbreaker in the second game. To bounce back in that third game has to give you confidence moving forward. As they head to LSU this weekend, which will be a tough task for the team.
For sure, and just do you guys have anything that you want to say about that? Just DeMichael, what have you seen out of this baseball team so far? And Will, if you want to share your thoughts as well, how do you think that will affect them? And just going down the stretch of this season, with Vitello in his first year, really being a rebuilding year, do you see them having more games like that where maybe they can compete well, or is it more just like a one-hit wonder type thing where they had that, but they're still too much of in a rebuilding stage to compete like that night in, night out?
Well, I think it was a big sign for this team after you lose 22-6 in the first game of the Florida series, and you turn it around after that, and you almost win the first game of the doubleheader, then you win the second game. I mean, that's a huge sign for a young team, and that's one of the main takeaways I have so far. And then you look at the pitching staff. I think the pitching staff has probably been the strongest part of this team this year, simply because, Serrano was a pitcher guy as well, but Vitello, he came in known for his work with pitchers, and you can see it now. I mean, they have a lot of young pitchers on this staff, but to get out those Florida hitters were key. If you've seen, the numbers that those Florida batters had throughout the season, they're amazing. And you got guys with double-digit home runs, and I think the most home runs a Tennessee player has is 4, right?
Yeah.
Four home runs. So that lineup was stacked, and for guys like Zach Lagenfelter to go out there and pitch that many innings in that first game of that doubleheader, this pitching staff is definitely the strong point right now, and it has to be that way in the SEC. And me and Tyler have talked about how important pitching is in the SEC, and we see it. When you pitch well, you're able to sneak a game away from the number one team in the nation, and that has to give you confidence. So obviously, like Blake said, the goal for this team should be to make the SEC tournament. Right now they look like they're on track, but it's real tight, and one series can change these races, so it's real tight right now. It'll be interesting to see how this team continues to progress, especially with the hitters as well, as far as the pitching staff and how far they can actually go.
Yeah, you mentioned Lingenfelter. That's a pretty interesting dynamic because he starts out as the Friday starter.
Yeah.
He's known as the guy with the most stuff, the most MLB potential. But he really struggled in his first few starts. They moved him to the closer role. And then after that first game of the doubleheader, Vitello said he was still impressed with what he did, even though he ended up losing the game there in the 11th inning. He did pitch four strong innings
well
to keep them in the game against a really good lineup.
Yeah, for sure. And so just, I think it's pretty interesting actually to talk about now. You've got this Tennessee baseball team that competed well against Florida, has had some, DeMichael and I have talked about this as well, have had some situations where they've looked better than maybe expected. And then you've got the Tennessee softball team right now, not trying to bring them in there and just rag on them, but they have struggled some, in SEC play, have struggled going on, and that's not exactly what you expected to see from these two teams heading in. You expected to see, the softball team being as dominant as they normally are, and the baseball team being in such a rebuilding way. So, just
with softball, now that we mentioned softball, I think softball is like, you could predict that this team would be dominant at the beginning of the season, but you couldn't predict that the SEC as a whole would be this dominant. Every team in this league is really good. Every team in this league could probably win a number of leagues in the nation right now, and that's saying a lot. I believe
crazy.
All teams are ranked top 35 RPI, and some of these games, they're barely winning, and then they turn around and they'll lose, and it's tough, and it makes people think, are they really as good as this team has been in the past? And you look at last year's team, the softball team, no one expected them to, be as good as they were.
Yeah, exactly.
So, in a way, you can say that team overachieved, and now this team is what you would say about on par with what that team was,
Sure.
But this team isn't overachieving. So that's how I'm looking at it right now, and so I think they'll be fine long term, but, that league is tough.
Sure, and I think anytime, in sports, when you have these expectations, so many times they're often wrong, and that can lead, a fan or an analyst to sort of see that and think, oh, well, they are overachieving or underachieving. But it's solely based, some people may have different expectations than others, so, we'll see where that goes. But now we're going to move over a little bit to talk about some Tennessee football. Obviously, spring practice is going strong. The orange and white game will be on April 21st. We will have several people there, and we're going to start you off here with Will. Will, you've covered a little bit of football, spring practice. I think you
Yeah.
wrote at least one article for us so far. So what have you seen so far from spring practice? What is there anything that you specifically noticed, and what is sort of, I guess, your preview for the orange and white game as it comes on the horizon?
I mean, it's kind of hard to make predictions about this team because Pruitt is so, tight-lipped about everything. But so far in spring practice, we got to see a little bit of routes on air, and both Garantano and McBride looked pretty sharp. Didn't see a lot of drop balls. A wide receiver that stood out to me was Brandon Johnson, and I'd expect him to be probably one of the better offensive players this year if Trey Smith can't go. The running back room looked very thin because I think right now they only have 3 or 4 on scholarship. Coleman, Banks, Fant, and stuff like that. But in terms of the orange and white game, the things to watch would be definitely the offensive line because that is probably the biggest kink in the armor of the Tennessee football team this season. They've only got, 7 scholarship offensive linemen right now. So
they're low on numbers, yeah.
They don't even have enough for an effective 2 deep in terms of scholarship
Which is
linemen.
an issue that's carried on over from last season, too, when they struggled with that.
It seems the past few years it's been a struggle. So that'll be something to watch. It'll be interesting to see if their offensive linemen can really hold their own in an actual game setting. And, of course, there's a QB battle to watch. No one really knows who has the edge there. And in terms of that, you have Keller Chris coming in the summer. But, definitely the offensive line should be something to watch. And I think it'll be interesting to see how the players that have changed position perform in the spring game, if they're still there. Like, you've got guys like Tyler Bird practicing at safety and Carlin Fields and May practicing at in the secondary, and then Princeton Font practicing at running back or kind of maybe a fullback hybrid. So it'll be interesting to see, the quarterback battle and then how these guys that have changed positions, if they stick there for the spring game, how they perform in their new positions.
For sure, and you mentioned, the game-like atmosphere. That's pretty interesting because, obviously Pruitt has, mentioned that he wants us to be a full game. He wants, to really put his players in that situation. But how many players do they have healthy to be put in a game-like situation like that in the offensive line? DeMichael, you were about to say something. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, you mentioned Brandon Johnson, and I'm going to say this until the season starts. This wide receiver core will probably be the best part of this offense this year. I mean, you bring in a coach. I mean, I love Yak Johnson. They call him Yak Johnson. I mean, he's the king at that, really. Like, yards after the catch. I mean, if you watched Anthony Miller this year and even other receivers he's churned out at Memphis and, just the type of receiver coach he is, he's really impressive. And, I mean, Brandon Johnson, he's always been known. Last year, a lot of his teammates always praised him for his technicality. They always say he's a technician when it comes to running routes, and he doesn't drop the ball a lot and those kind of things. But, you saw that a lot early on in the season. He was the guy that was getting, he had like a 7-catch game, and he was catching a lot of passes early on in the season. And you combine him with the more explosive option, in my opinion, Marquez Callaway, who's the guy that's probably going to average above 15 yards a catch, catching the deep balls. And, you have that nice tandem right there. And a guy that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about is Alontae Taylor. He's looked really good from what I've seen. The early enrollee, Alontae Taylor, he's looked really good. Looks like he can fit right into that mix. And, I mean, Josh Palmer, me and Tyler know this. I mean, he was the guy that got all the praise at the wide receiver position last year. All the players, Butch Jones, they all said Josh Palmer could be, one of the next big receivers to come out of Tennessee type thing. And so you combine it, with Josh Palmer taking that step from his freshman to sophomore year, and you get a coach like Yak Johnson to team up with a technician like Brandon Johnson. I guess no relation there, but and you get Marquez Callaway. I mean, we all saw the capabilities that he has. I think he'll end up probably being a top 3, top 4 round pick whenever he decides to leave, with how explosive he is. And you combine, all of those pieces, and I think you have a really solid receiver core. It's definitely the position with the least amount of questions on offense. You have the offensive line. You have the lack of depth, offensive line, lack of depth at tight end. He just mentioned the lack of depth at running back, but you're getting a transfer, a graduate transfer, and, I mean, you have Ty Chandler. But still, I think that the wide receiver position will be the strongest position offensively, at least.
Yeah, and that'll be very interesting to see if that does come to fruition because, with Butch Jones in his time, that was arguably one of the least strong position groups,
Yeah.
I think, at least in terms of production. You know, I remember Butch's first year, you know, he had Rajon Neal was his running back, and he ran for over 1,000 yards. And not to put anything on, you know, against Rajon Neal, but I'm not sure that a lot of people would expect him to come out with that type of production. I think mainly because they ran the ball so much. You know, there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity for those receivers that, you know, Butch Jones had to really engage to create those plays. And so I think, you know, with Tyson Helton having worked in dynamic passing attacks in the past, them bringing, you know, Pruitt said that they did want to run the ball, but I think, you know, bringing more, if they do bring more of a dynamic passing attack, that is something that fans could definitely latch on to and be
I
pretty
definitely
happy
think with Tyson Helton coming, they're definitely going to be a run-oriented team, you know, that power run game. But you look at USC historically, the West Coast style offense that they've always employed, and they take their shots. I mean, that offense is always, I mean, during the Matt Leinart years, they had probably two of the best wide receivers in the nation playing on that team with running backs like Lindell White and Reggie Bush. So that's not to say, you know, that they won't get the ball to these receivers. I mean, I feel like I said, the combination there it's like a perfect match. When you have a guy who can get the 7 to 8 yard catches across the middle like Brandon Johnson, and then you have the guy when you go play action can catch the 30-yard deep ball like Marquez Callaway. Then you have an explosive guy who you can get the ball to on screens like Alontae Taylor. It's a nice mix that they have there. And Josh Palmer, he's physically gifted. I mean, he's a guy you can see catching a lot of jump balls down the road for this team. So they have a nice combination at receiver. Now you have to say, okay, will the quarterbacks, you know, be able to get these guys the ball? And that's the question right now.
For sure. But that's going to wrap it up for us today, guys. Thanks for watching, and also thanks to Blake and Will for coming on the show to us. You'll likely be seeing a lot of them next year and then later on. But thanks for watching. Check out the Daily Beacon's website for more sports content. Make sure to follow us on Twitter, the UT Daily Beacon Twitter account, sports account, wherever you like to get your news from. But thanks for watching. This is Tyler Wombles. That's DeMichael Cole. That's Blake Von Hagen. And that's Will Backus. And we'll see you next time.